If you're at a loss on a rainy afternoon, I recommend you read the Mishnah. Personally, I find it interesting not for what is said, but for the questions it answers. For instance, with regard to ritual washing, all people are acceptable to pour water over one's hands, even a deaf mute, a mentally incapable person, or a child. If no one is present, one should hold the vessel between one's knees and thus pour it out over one's hands. Lean a jug over so that the water will fall over your hands. It is acceptable if a monkey pours the water. And so we move from one oral tradition to another, and my rabbinical sermon on special snowflakes. And no, I am not a rabbi, but I am available for birthday parties and bar mitzvahs. Oy vey! And because words matter, snowflake as an insult is a rather odd term, since everyone is a snowflake. There has never been anything like you, and there will never be anything like you again. And yes, I know that mathematically it's probably impossible that all snowflakes are different, but it's still weird that those using the expression as an insult also happen to be the type who use terms like statist and cultural Marxism derisively. Apparently there is no contradiction in opposing collectivist thought with collectivist thought. But what is it that special snowflakes are doing, if not wondering if a monkey can hold the jug? You know, and I know, that who holds the jug is less important than the ritual of washing your hands, and we, no doubt, have engaged in the same iconoclasm. All that ever changes in these matters is the icon. Which leads me to evolution, since, like it or not, this is an evolutionary question, at least in terms of the ideas. I noticed yesterday, in response to Theresa May's proposal to destigmatise issues surrounding mental health, a comment that mental illness is an evolutionary marker by which potential partners are discouraged from mating in order not to pass the mental illness gene to the next generation. At which point I found myself wondering if the ghost of Marie Stopes had taken to leaving comments on the Daily Mail. Okay, take a deep breath, clear your mind, and ask yourself if categorising climate change deniers as mentally ill, which has been suggested, will stop the gene for climate change denial passing to the next generation. And having laughed your socks off, perhaps you might like to consider the evolutionary process by which this form of Lamarckian nonsense has come to represent Darwinism. Not that it is a new phenomena, hence why I mention Marie Stopes. Indeed, if one reads Civic Biology, the book at the centre of the Scopes monkey trial, one sees very much the same arguments for selective breeding. Yet selective breeding is the opposite of evolution, and ironically the basis of that phrase so loved by the new right, cultural Marxism. And since we have mentioned Marie Stopes, she was born in Edinburgh, and in that city, 60 years before her birth, Burke and Hare were robbing graves and killing people to provide bodies in the name of science to Dr. Robert Knox. You know, the same Dr. Knox who, having escaped the gallows, was one of the main proponents of scientific racism and something called transcendental anatomy, basically the belief that there was an ideal plan that lays at the heart of biology, a form of creationism, if you will, or a biological music of the spheres. According to that fountain of wisdom, Wikipedia, the theories of Dr. Knox and his ilk were replaced by Darwin and the theory of evolution, which perhaps goes to show that Wikipedia is not entirely reliable, since it's not exactly hard to find evidence of Dr. Knox's posing as Darwinists littering the history of the 20th century and on into the present. But don't argue. It's science! Which by circuitous route leads us back to the snowflakes of the social justice movement, who appear equally hell-bent on using this pseudoscience, or the ideas behind it, to implement their version of transcendental anatomy. After all, what are the proponents of intersectional racism, sexism, and the various phobias, if not petty Dr. Knoxes weighing brains with words and not scales, and selectively breeding out those who oppose their version of the ideal at the heart of humanity, if only by blocking them on Twitter? Right, in the spirit of cultural appropriation, I'm off to perform my rabbinical duties. Oy vey! If I were a rich man, yabba dabba 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 dum.